Welcome to this 1-hour information session on Engender Equality's Advocates for Change program. I acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands that we meet on, the Palawa and Pakana people of Lutruwita, Tasmania. I pay my respects to elders past and present and recognise their continuing connection to the land and waters of this beautiful state. I acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded and that this always was and always will be Aboriginal land. I further pay my respects to all First Nations people and acknowledge their struggle for self-determination across the globe. I also acknowledge the past change makers and activists who have really forged the path that we are walking on today. Without the work of victim survivors and advocates in the past, we wouldn't be having the conversation that we are today. And I know that this is the result of people who were radical people who were able to take a risk and put themselves out there to be able to have this conversation, make people feel uncomfortable and demand that this is an issue that needs to be addressed. Some of you might find the information that we cover in this workshop to be upsetting, disturbing or triggering. And if that's the case, I really want to encourage you to reach out for support. On the screen, you'll see the number for Family Violence Counselling and Support Service, which is a Tasmanian phone line that can support people who are needing help. I also encourage you to call 1-800-RESPECT if as an alternative service if needed. So Engender Equality was established in 1987. It's based on an intersectional feminist philosophy, which means that we recognise that some members of the community have additional barriers to accessing power, agency and services than others. We're trauma-informed and provide evidence-based counselling. We also offer a range of education workshops and community education, community training opportunities, and pretty much we'll have conversations around family violence and gender equality wherever and whenever asked. We produce world-class evidence-based resources, and you're very welcome to go to our website to have a look at what some of those resources are. We're governed by a diverse group of women who also bring a range of skills and insights into their governance role. Where necessary, we'll make referrals to other agencies, and we are part of a really strong network of collaborative services in Tasmania that are supporting victim survivors across different areas of challenges, of experiences, and of service and systems engagement. And we also support advocacy for systemic change. So we very much look at actively being a part of conversations that are happening with politicians, in the media, at systems design, wherever needed, to be able to be raising awareness of where the shortfalls are in systems response to victim survivors. And we do this work from an anti-oppression point of view. And surrounding all of this are our philosophies, practices and resources that are really based and informed by the voices of lived experience. So we very much want to be promoting the expertise of lived experience and of victim survivors in everything that we're doing. So the Advocates for Change program has really been around for as long as I have, and I started in this role in 2013. I was able to, from the beginning, provide opportunities and find opportunities for people with lived experience to co-deliver training with me, attend conferences, and also represent their experience to the media. Things got a little bit more formalised in about 2019 when we were a part of Our Watch's Voices for Change program. And through Voices of Change, we were handed a training manual that we could use to be engaging lived experience voices and victim survivors into a more into a process that imparted skills and knowledge to be able to come together to represent their experience, and also at the same time to be talking to the drivers of violence against women. So we also wanted to be highlighting the opportunity to be able to prevent violence from happening in the first place. Since 2020, we've had a part-time project coordinator working in the role to facilitate opportunities between our Advocates for Change and media and other opportunities that are coming up. And we currently have about 35 active victim survivors in our Advocates for Change program. We endeavour to secure additional funding, and as much as possible we'll apply for grants and other resources. And participation in Advocates for Change is entirely voluntary. That means a couple of things. One is that there isn't any formal remuneration, but we are able to provide gift vouchers to help with fuel and other costs, and also as a recognition of the resources and efforts that is involved in advocacy. And also as a voluntary program, it's very much that all Advocates for Change at every opportunity are welcome to opt out at any point. There's no obligation involved in the process. So the program's about positioning victim survivors of family and sexual violence as experts. And that means experts in their experience of family sexual violence, and it also means experts in terms of the system's response. So where there's been engagement with other services that are designed to help or have intended to help. So that might be the police, it might be courts, it might be children's and family services, or it might even be GPs and health services, whether they have responded well or in many cases haven't responded well. We adopt a community mobilisation model, which means that very much the affected community, and in this instance victim survivors of family violence, are at the heart of decision making and strategising about what it is that we're doing through this work. We want to be promoting positive, equal and respectful relationships. So we're really coming to this work with an idea that we ourselves need to be modelling the behaviours that we want to see in others. And for that's an anti-oppression approach that considers the marginalisation for all communities that are restricted access to power and decision making. So a big part of that is wanting to challenge social norms and practices. So very much we're wanting to create a different world, to be able to influence change across society, so that we are existing in communities that are more supportive of its members. A big part of that is the condoning of violence, which we know to be one of the primary drivers of violence against women. Self-determination is key to all of our work, and especially when we're thinking about marginalised communities, we very much want to be promoting the centering of communities in agency and in self-determination, and that we do that through an intersectional framework. And we're coordinated by a part-time coordinator. This position we're currently recruiting for, but hopefully by the time you're listening to this, that will be filled. And the support that we offer for advocates is ongoing. We provide support before, during, and after every advocacy opportunity, and where possible, we also coordinate ongoing training. And so we want to be able to provide ongoing training opportunities alongside of the day-to-day support that we can offer. So from an intersectional point of from an intersectional point of view, we want to be supporting people from all backgrounds and all experiences to apply. Of particular interest to gender equality is promoting the experience of transgender people and sex workers. And I name transgender people and sex workers quite intentionally, recognising that within the current feminist political discussions that are happening, that sometimes transgender people and sex workers are excluded from discussions, and there's an extra layer of vilification that's happening towards those communities. In gender equality recognises all transgender people, and we work with all women, we work with non-binary people, we work with gender diverse people, and promoting again that the idea of self-determination and opportunities for people to be agents in their own lives, as well as having influence over the design of society. And likewise for sex workers, we recognise that sex work is work, and also stand in solidarity with sex workers and sex worker organisations for their right to self-determination. So why become an advocate for change? So we see the opportunity for lived experience advocacy as a very powerful way to encourage other people to get involved. Storytelling has a particular powerful impact if people are able to hear about an instance, or hear about a critique or a point of view from somebody who has lived through that experience. It resonates with people's hearts. People might identify themselves in the story or with the storyteller, and that helps to people become personally invested, which is often something that's necessary in order to create broader change. We want to be able to increase understanding. So there's so much work that we need to be doing in Australia to be addressing the silencing that's happened over literally centuries, to the point where we have created this environment where instances of abuse and experiences of being victimised through gendered violence and through family violence has become absolutely silent, so that people aren't able to speak up, people aren't able to recognise experiences of violence. The whole phenomenon of victim blaming is part of this silencing of the issue. And then the multitude of opportunities for collusion with perpetrators, and where perpetrator accountability is really quite a new concept that we're really still trying to unpack and integrate into our conversations. So we want to be elevating the literacy, the intelligence, and the frequency that this conversation is happening. As I said before, we believe that the lived experience expertise is absolutely necessary in terms of informing policy, practice, and law. We know that social connectedness is really important to in some ways, to rectify the harms that have been caused by family violence, but we also know that connected communities are powerful communities. So where we can bring together victim survivors around this topic, we see this beautiful community of solidarity forming, which really invigorates advocacy opportunities, advocates, brings greater momentum, and definitely further elevates the voices. Some examples of the things that we have done. We have been involved in 16 Days of Activism campaign, which happens annually. We supported the changes to Tasmania's strangulation laws. We've participated in consultations around the National Plan to End Violence Against Women and Children. We've presented to the Disability Royal Commission, multiple interviews with newspapers, radio outlets across Tasmania, and also in the national sphere as well. We have a regular column in 40 Degrees South magazine, one of our advocates regularly writes there. We have been involved in TASCOS, Council of Social Services policy conversation, and also been a part of panels on the National Domestic and Family Violence Recovery Alliance with Laurel House as a local sexual assault service. And these are really just a handful of examples of where we have been very active and been able to have a really strong impact. But there's been also creative opportunities where we've worked with artists and actors in spaces. We've been involved with some of the bigger ticket magazines in Australia. So there's really just endless examples of where we've been able to engage and elevate our voice. So the value statement behind the work that we do is that we are addressing all tiers across a socio-ecological framework. So we're looking at impacting relationships that are happening on an individual level, as well as broader hierarchies which are creating issues. We are very much committed to an intersectional feminist framework, and again around that support for self-determination and agency. And we expect that everybody involved in this program and across in gender equality are required to educate themselves about the struggles for people living within these intersections. So again, this is the work that we want to be doing internally and through our engagement with staff, volunteers, our board, to make sure that we are as informed as possible, and through being informed, we are not contributing to marginalisation, but rather we are bringing people along with us through our campaigns. So some of you might be aware of the work of Kimberly Crenshaw and the concept of intersectionality. So an intersectional framework acknowledges that gender isn't the only factor that drives violence, but there can also be multiple, infinite really, other presentations of identities or labels or lived experience, and that can include disability, ethnicity, class, Indigenous identity, sexual orientation, and really any factors that can impact on, in this instance, impacting on experiences of family and sexual violence. So in this little model that we're looking at here, we can see that the further someone might move away from the centre, the harder life can be, or the more removed we are from power and therefore for choices. And the further as well we get away from the centre of this circle, the more likely people are to experience forms of oppression and really can be quite active forms of marginalisation, often manifesting in racism, or I was going to say violence through racism, or violence through sexism, or violence through the ableism, and these forms of very active discrimination that we're aware of in the community. I think there's also can be more subtle forms of isolation as well, and we need to be always thinking of ways that people are spoken when we're bringing stigmatized language to refer to groups of people, being aware that there are biases in there, and this is something that we all carry with us. We're all very much a product of the society that we live in, and it's not so much to sort of think that we're going to be above this and different to this and somehow operating outside of it, but much more about recognizing that we are a part of this, and that we can be aware of as these things come up, which they will do, if we're aware of them, we'll be able to notice that they come up, and then when they do come up for us, recognize what they are and be able to know that we're impacted and know that we have other ways we need to be operating to counteract that bias. So we offer we want Advocates for Change program to be strengths-based and trauma-informed. So that means that we're very much promoting safety of our participants at all times. So safety looks like the safety for you when you're engaging in an advocate for change process, and that might be safety in terms of relationship with others that are in that immediate environment. It might also be safety in terms of your experience of family or sexual violence, and also safety for yourself emotionally. So we can be working with you, as I said, before, during, and after an engagement to make sure that we're considering all of those factors and supporting you through that. As much as possible, we want to be trustworthy, and we want to be transparent. So that looks like being really open about decision-making processes, bringing in opportunities for consultation, really inviting critique and feedback, and of course, always an opportunity for people to get involved, because we certainly don't want to be and can't be doing this on our own, that it does take a whole community for us to be doing this well. Hence this process. We really value peer support. So nobody understands an experience of marginalisation or experience of oppression better than other people who have experienced that same marginalisation or oppression. So through Advocates for Change, we do create very supportive networks between victim survivors, where there can be that solidarity or collegiality and friendships between people. We want to be working in collaboration and looking at ways that where we can form networks and alliances that can efficiently promote our missions. We want to be bringing in voices and choice through empowerment practices, so that the decision making isn't held within the organisation, but as much as possible shared with all participants. And we recognise the cultural, historical, and gender issues which are really impacting on where we're at today. Recognising that this too will become history shortly in time, and that forms the path of progress moving forward. So hopefully we can continue that work that's happened before us and provide opportunities in the future for others to also get involved. We're very passionate about challenging victim blaming. As I said earlier about the huge blanket of silence that exists around this topic, victim blaming is certainly one of the main mechanisms that we have that is enacted on a daily basis in Australia to keep victim survivors quiet about their experiences. If a victim survivor feels responsible for what's happened, they're going to be less likely to seek support. They're going to less likely see an injustice, because while you're blaming yourself, you hold yourself entirely responsible for what's happened, and you're using that you're taking that on board internally as being as having a problem, as opposed to being able to really pivot that towards a society that is supporting the physical and sexual abuse of large populations in our community. So some examples of victim blaming are, but he's such a nice guy, or she must be exaggerating, must just be an understanding, or what was she drinking? And around alcohol and sexual history, the time of the day, what someone was wearing. But all of these things are used to really minimise experiences of abuse and violence, and to shift any kind of responsibility away from the person using violence and onto the person who's being targeted by their violence. So we very much want that to be key to the work that we're doing here. Some of the requirements in applying for Advocates for Change is that you must be over 18 and be a Tasmanian resident. We get to be able to open this up to the other states in Australia. It's required that you have a lived experience of intimate partner violence, family violence, or sexual violence. The preference is that you're not a current client in gender equality. So if you are currently a client, we would want to talk to you about that before you put in an expression of interest to be involved. If it's been 2 years since you've left an abusive partner, we would like to be able to undertake a risk assessment with you, just to check that that you're in a position of safety. And we also consider children and other family members in that process as well. You need to be willing to speak to the media or speak publicly about your experience. So while we don't expect you to go into in-depth detail about what has happened to you, it is important that we can leverage that experience of what has happened and be able to reflect it against the systemic challenges that we face, so that we can do so we can create that change. So it might be, I was in an abusive relationship. I was married to an abusive person for 10 years, and to help others in that situation, it would be great if there were more supports available, or if it would be great if there was more specialist services available in the community, so that other people can get help when they need it. So references to your expertise, and then being able to then follow that through with a request or an advocacy statement that creates that points towards the solution into the future. We do ask that people aren't involved in current or ongoing legal proceedings, because that can often really limit what people are able to say in public. We have our training sessions, 4 days of training booked into the calendar on the 31st of October, and also the 7th, 14th and 21st of November. Now, these happen via Zoom, so that we engage people from across the state into that training. But in order to engage in the process, you do need to be available on those days. The training each day will go for about 5.5 to 6 hours, and we usually make that starting at around 9:30, so that people can pop away for school pickup and looking after children in the afternoons. You need to be able to publicly discuss your experience of violence or abuse. So we do need to have a somewhat level of comfort. Now, saying that, for some media opportunities, you can use aliases, especially if it's in print media. That would be completely fine. And we've also been through multiple television recorded interviews where people have had their identity masked through pixelation and their voices altered as well. But if you aren't able to speak publicly, then that will limit some of the options that are available to you. And so we also need you to be able to volunteer for advocacy opportunities, and those things will become you'll be invited into opportunities as they come up. So what the process is from here is that we do ask that you attend an information session, or in this instance, watch this recording. We will invite you to complete an expression of interest form. If successful, you will be again invited to attend an interview, which will be around checking for safety, checking that you know what you're putting your hand up for, making sure that you're in a position where you'll be able to be safe moving through the group process. And then if assessed is ready, you'll be asked to attend those 4 days of training. Following that, there'll be a further notification on whether you'll move on to the next step, which is an induction meeting, where we will talk more one-on-one about what it is that you're wanting to achieve from the process. And then you join our mailing list, and we'll start receiving opportunities. So during this process, we do offer a really high level of support. So what that is we will be arranging interviews, speaking engagements that might be with journalists, it might be directly live on the radio. It could also be through more in-depth interviews for bigger national print articles. We would then, if we've received a request or we have generated a request, we'll put out a call of interest to advocates, and we often actually go by a first in, first served. So usually the people who reply the quickest to an email will be the ones that we would consider. We also will be keeping people's particular interest in mind. So if someone has a particular expertise or interest around a particular topic, for example, the safety of pets, we would have that recorded in a spreadsheet, so that if we then did get a inquiry around pets, we would know that you might have that particular interest or that particular experience that you'd like to speak to. We very much try to ensure confidentiality as much as possible across the program. So we are always looking at ways that we can be more discreet. We don't share any information without anybody's permission, for example. We always use blind copy for emails. So and if there's ever a time when you don't feel like your confidentiality is being respected or adhered to, you'll have to let us know so we can address that. We offer help with speech writing and storytelling, and also key messaging. So we can do that before a engagement, so that you're feeling as comfortable and prepared as possible, and also that the opportunity is maximizing that opportunity, or maximizing the impact through that opportunity. We also can, if necessary, support you during an interview or an event, and then following the interview event, be there to debrief with you about the experience and give any feedback or receive any feedback. And we also endeavour to provide training opportunities, workshops, and access to conferences as they arise. So we do really find that as the network expands, opportunities are also expanding. So so very much when new advocates are coming in, that we find that there's also new opportunities that come with new advocates. So thinking again back to that idea of safety, and in wanting to promote and support your safety, that's a process for us around managing risk. So not all opportunities are forward facing. There is work to be done in the background if you're not at the point where you want to be or able to be doing that public facing work. There is never any pressure to engage, and there's always that possibility of opting out. And when I say that, I mean it most sincerely, that can be really right at the absolute last point before you're about to walk on stage. You can say, no, I'm not doing this, and that's going to be completely okay. So I very much want you to feel like you always have complete control over what's happening, or as much as possible you're controlling what's happening. And if at any point it doesn't feel safe or it doesn't feel right, that will be supporting you to do something different, so that you are feeling safe and supported. You have the right to conceal your identity, so that might be by using an alias, or perhaps having somebody else read out your story. And there's multiple ways that we can be doing that if required. We're very much available to read and review news articles before they're being published, so we can bring a risk management lens around that, especially if there's anything that you're concerned about that might have any consequences on family members, children. We very much want to be making sure that everybody is safe. We also want to make sure that that there aren't risks to in gender equality in any way. So that sort of partly explains to why we don't. The Advocates for Change remain somewhat independent in gender equality, so that there is some freedom to be able to speak from your point of view and from your opinions, without necessarily having to be within that formal structure of the brand and the policy practices of gender equality. if there is some sort of breach around confidentiality or practice, in Gender Equality reserves the right to discontinue individuals from the Advocates for Change program. And really recognising that along the way, circumstances are going to change, and that's really okay. We're learning all the time in this space. We certainly make mistakes, and really want to reserve the right to be able to learn from our mistakes and do better next time. So the training program for 2023 will be held on October the 31st, November the 7th, 14th and 21st. On the first day, we'll be looking at the gender drivers of violence. So looking at that from the Change the Story point of view, which is the Our Watch framework, and also digging deeper into the concept of intersectionality. On the second day, we'll be developing key messaging and how we can bring that personal experience into the political space. Day 3, we're going to be developing a story and preparing a speech. And this is also so that you're beginning to get some practice around public speaking. Certainly the greatest antidote to the anxieties around speaking in public is practice. So we do want to give you opportunities to practice speaking in front of your peers and your colleagues on day 3. On day 4, we go even a little bit deeper into that, and we'll be fine-tuning our speeches, find more practice with storytelling and more practice with delivering and talking to in front of people and in front of groups. So I do really want to encourage you to get back to me if you do have any questions. It's important that you feel aware of the process that you're engaging in and comfortable moving forward. So just in closing, please have a think about whether you'd like to continue. We will be sending out expression of interest forms with the position description and a question sheet about whether you're ready to tell your story or not. And if you haven't received any of these documents over the next few days, please let me know. The expressions of interest will close on the September 8th, 2023, with the interviews, one-on-one interviews being held in mid-September, and of course the training commencing at the very end of October and moving into November. The email contact for all of your questions is advocates@engenderequality.org.au. And I want to thank you for joining me today, and thank you for your time. And please let me know if you have any questions.